It's interesting to be able to connect this way, eyes open, and then with your eyes closed. The terminology, the term "going inside" feels more like that when you close your eyes. You're turning off all the other senses and you're just going inside. There is nowhere else to go because everything else is shut down. Where visually, when we're looking at each other, we're really bringing whatever that person has into us. Especially as spiritual teacher, we were watching the other day, Andy mentioned this guy named Thegazer Braco, I think is pronounced, and he is been around for a long time, and his thing is he doesn't talk. He just looks for like 7 minutes, and then he goes off stage. And it was interesting. It was like last Saturday. No one's getting together. All these spiritual teachers are going online, and he would look for like 7 minutes, walk off this very fancy stage, beautiful stage, and then these really pretty girls kind of communicate what he is, what he does, and then he had this fancy brochure. I mean, it's like an infomercial with all these people crying with the experience of bringing him in, right? Bringing him into this self, and having, for some people, a profound experience of, even though we're looking out, it's coming in, bringing us into us. And the idea of bringing, going inside to find ourselves, to go inside to get the answers. It's funny because once you kind of awaken from it, you're actually out all the time. You're no longer, in Buddhism, they talk about like, kind of killing the self off, get rid of this self, this individual self that is keeping us disconnected, and trying to remove that, quiet that part up so that this other part of us arises. And when you awaken, the self is there, but yet it's not interested in itself as much anymore. It's more interested in how it interconnects with everything else, with the whole universe. It's much more drawn to that. It's like the self just expanded in as the universe. So when we say go inside is really allowing something outside, a lot of times, to come inside, to hit us in a way, to transform us in a way. And so like Braco, and then I think that same night we saw, Shelley went to see this guy several years ago, Bhagavan in India. And same thing, really beautiful. I mean, they kind of unbelievable palace. I mean, it's like this beautiful building, place, structure in the middle of all these trees, and very gorgeous. I mean, this place was just it almost looked like the Wizard of Oz, It really was quite mind-blowing. But the same thing, he's there sitting, and then his wife's right there, and they're just sitting, and then they're expanding, they're pushing their energy out to the people who connect with him. And Shelley actually said, I feel something in my hands. And that is like you're going out to bring it in, going out to bring something in that you trust, that feels like it's going to help find yourself. Because we're all really one, and we all have that kind of power with each other to really shift and connect with each other in that way. They're just doing it, on a more global way, but really it's really looking at each person. It looks like that person's looking, Braco's looking right at you. I'm looking right at you. And that there's a power to that once you realize the power that you have with each other and the power that we are connected to everybody, that we are fundamentally each other in the truest sense. There's another example of that. Years ago, this woman, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, this woman, Abramovich, she is a long form artist, meaning she does these crazy stuff for hours and days and weeks at a time. They could be sitting and doing nothing in a pose for like hours, and people come and go and watch these experiences. And she did a thing, I don't know, several years ago in New York, where she sat on a chair in front of a gallery on the streets of Manhattan, and people like walking by, because she was sitting and there was a chair in front of her a few feet away, and then one person sits, has no idea because there's no sign about anything. She's just sitting there, and she's looking straight ahead, like someone's there, like this. Someone's here. She can feel them, and then people start slowly, one by one, start to sit in this chair. And then you can start to feel this experience. They were showing pictures of these people crying and in tears because of this deep connection that this woman was giving them, because she was so in this present moment that people came in off the streets in this, in this kind of noisy, hectic, chasing mind. And here's someone's like this, and this thing's coming into that. And then it's like they lock in, and then you can touch that person's soul, which is so incredible. We have that capability. It's quite beautiful. So each one of these examples are just different. Streets of San Francisco, this beautiful place, people looking at each other. And again, it's this going in, closing our eyes, feeling ourselves to go out and connect and to be with each other in a way that is really magical. For me, it's like playing constantly. I mean, I like to look at people, and I'm looking at there's something in them that I can see that is, a lot of times they can't quite see it yet, but it's clearly there. And to connect into that place with somebody is, for me, it's complete play. I'm just like playing with the person. I know some of this stuff seems really serious at times, like Bhagavan's like, really kind of very intense and looking at this way. And Braco's more relaxed. He seems not as intense, but he has a certain, quality about his stare that he has, the connection that he has with that. But really, it's kind of like we're all playing with each other in the background. It just sometimes doesn't look like in the in this level, but really we're here kind of to play with each other in this time and space, because it changes pretty quickly. With this whole thing with the COVID, and I was talking with Shelley this morning. She was looking at, she's a demographer, so she talks about numbers and all these scenarios that they have at their fingertips, data points. And she was saying something about, this is reducing a lot of people's lives by like 12 years. If you get it and die, it's like 12. It shortened your life by 12 years. And yet, it didn't shorten anything, really. That's what happened in that moment for them. There was no guarantee of anything. And when you sit in those places with people and you have this deep connection, you can feel like how volatile this moment is at some level, and how powerful it is at the same time. And when we are trying to live in numbers, like, oh, we should live 12 more years, we've lost 12 more years. But If you live that way, then you lose right now completely. And a lot of people who, I mean, people want to live, obviously. That seems to be the case. You ask people they want to live. Yes, they want to live. They want to prevent dying. And yet, most people don't act like they want to live. They want to live in time, but they do not necessarily want to live right this moment. And I find that to be the case with a lot of people. I look at the pictures of the people who are dying, and this virus is affecting people who are less healthy. And you almost like look like, okay, why are you not being, why is your life not that important that you don't want to take care of yourself at one level, right? Like if this life is so important and so beautiful, why would you not take care of this being, which is really a physical, biological being that requires certain things for it to exist in the right way? And yet a lot of people get attacked because they haven't been doing that. And yet people want to live, but they don't act like they want to live in so many ways. It's like we're looking at the clock, we got X more time to live. But as you found out, that ended 12 years before it was supposed to happen. And if we kind of get closer to that place where we're like in this right now, then we don't get caught in 12 more years. When you start to awaken up, time is like irrelevant. Death is irrelevant because it doesn't have time, and all it's doing is going from one to another thing, from one form to another thing, to another form. It's a constant flow. It goes from this place to this place. There's a lot of people that I've read, especially a couple of people I've read books on, Jill Bolte Taylor, Stroke of Insight, and Dying to Be Me by Anita Moorshead, I think's her name. They both said the same thing, that they, in the moment when they were like ready to kind of go physically, and they were in these other places, they said, it was so beautiful here that why do I want to go back into this body and suffer and struggle through life when it's so beautiful over here? Like the other side of life is some other place. And some people have touched it in certain ways. And they're like, it's so beautiful. Why do I want to come back to this? And yet when you're just here, it's like, I don't want to leave this place because it's something. Not sure what it is, but it's something. I get moments of happiness or moments of this in between all the other stuff. But it's enough to keep me interested in this life. And yet these experiences that people have, where they say it's so beautiful here, it takes a lot of effort. For those two, it took a lot of effort to decide to come back. Anita was like, okay, your time, I think she heard something like, your time's not now. You have to come back. And Jill's like, oh, I have to come, I'm gonna come back through this and struggle through this because my mother wants me back so badly. You know, I love my mother so much, it brought me back. But those two places were better than this place in their experience. And yet we want to be here, not to die, but we act so many ways like that's not true. And so when we sit in these places, we meditate here and sit and feel the beautifulness of connecting, and then the beautifulness of just going and closing our eyes and feeling our own essence is really such a powerful thing when you really hit it. And you're like, oh God, of course I want to live. It's really unbelievable. If you asked me, someone said, would you want to live 1,000 years? I said, sure, I'll take it. I would, give me 1,000 years. It'd be fascinating because it's always unwinding every moment, right? Like you can see the unwinding of everything constantly every moment when you're really in this place, this interaction, this plane with the universe. When I first started teaching this idea within exercise, I remember in the gym not that long into it, and I was doing some stuff, and like all of a sudden I could hear like, oh, that's what you want, universe. You just want to play. Okay, good. You want to just play. And really, it's like this interaction, the interaction between us and nature is a playing thing. You know, babies play. We're always playing when we're younger before we start getting serious, but we're really essentially want to play. And the universe is exactly the same thing. It wants to play. It wants to unveil itself to all of us in a way that like is just so here and not getting caught in what could happen down the road. 12 years that I lost because of something. But when you're here fully, you don't lose anything. You can't lose anything. Even if your life ended right now, you don't lose anything because you're here completely. And you touch that for a moment and you'll know what that is. And you're just, you know what the possibilities are. I think there's something when I go to the Zen Center once in a while, there's one line that says something about the perfect moment doesn't happen, it only happens like it's difficult to do. On 100 billion million kalpas, something like that, like a million, like a lot of eons to get perfect, to be just perfect. And we're not talking about being perfect in this moment, but we are talking about how we connect out, coming into us, and in, going out. And that makes really the deep connections that the universe wants to play with us and that we want to play with each other in that way. Then it's really so much fun. So we never lose anything, no matter how long life is for us. It really won't. From this place, it doesn't matter because it just transforms into something else. That is like the $10 million question, right? Like, what is that internal thing that, first of all, you're here and existing. So that's already saying that you want to be here. I mean, that's at the root of it, that really is, you have to almost plug into that. It sounds simple, but you're just plugging into the fact that you are here. Forget about everything that you have, that you don't do, that you think you don't do, beat yourself up, all those kind of things. But really, if you tear that away, it's just this simple thing of just feeling that you're here. Just that for a moment, you're here right now. Get rid of everything else, and if you just feel that for a moment, sometimes all this thing needs is a moment of, and then it can open up in so many different ways that it removes these things that we're attaching our reality to. And the things that we attach our reality to really can collapse in an instant. Well, in death, it collapses in an instant, but in life, it's the same thing. That once you kind of really just touch it for a moment without all the other stuff, you do exist. I mean, really, you're here right now. And it's that by itself is telling you that there's something there. Now the steps after that, sometimes you get the answer in itself, but sometimes there are steps that people can do. And this is one of them, for example, is sitting and connecting in a way that you're kind of getting in and opening up a little bit. So opening up your channels a little bit, getting some space, right? Getting some space around that constant barrage of thoughts. And then, there's a lot of different methodologies, so to speak. I use the exercise part because there's so much in it. There's a doing process in it as well as a being process. And I like the formulation of bringing those two together, because then it starts to open up other areas where you can realize that this space that you create in one place can be brought somewhere else. And then you're not just caught in these thoughts that continue. And sometimes you just got to go to the basic thing again, that I am here, period. This came kind of the other day about the fact that most of us have a very focused and yet very narrow reality. And, you know, we get caught in who we are, and then we focus, and it becomes very, we get caught into it, and it becomes very narrow. And that's kind of how most of us are. It's the narrowiness of our focus of that is affecting our reality. And then in this focus, when other things are happening outside of it, it kind of throws us out. It doesn't feel, you know, for a lot of people, talk even about near death, for people who are very focused, that they can't even see that, you know, it's a big, you're getting bombarded by this constantly. Here's your reality, and then here's all these other realities hitting you. And you don't know where to go with it, because who's this, who's that, who's, you know, everyone's kind of focused in their own reality, and but it's very narrow. And so we have a very narrow thing, and that narrowness is great, but if you're smashing against other narrow focus realities, we have problems, because they rarely connect at the same time. So we're always separating, and that kind of, it's like then we get caught in the mind. That's when the head and the brain, like, it's so brilliant in this focusing and being able to get to be something, whatever that is in our life, like an engineer or an athlete or whatever. It's very focused to get to that level. But then in that focusing, we cannot, it's difficult for us to adjust quick enough when something new comes in, and we're very slow to it, because we just haven't had a brain that's kind of more open. It's more narrow. And then this brain becomes, you know, then it becomes hell when the brain becomes like that, because it's so dynamic. There's so much there. It's so dynamic. It's like, well, you're giving me only one thing, and I want to kind of spread out a little bit, but I can't do it because you're just keeping me in this narrow lane. And, you know, so it's a difficult thing to let go of that. And in that moment, because we've been just narrowing it for such a long time. When you're a child, it's much more open. It's not focused, and it's not very narrow. So they can have these experiences, like outer body experiences, and like someone I know here who's in the call who swam when they were younger, and they felt like they didn't have to breathe in the water when they were younger, right? And so you don't do that when you start to narrow. You're like, your swimming coach says, you need to breathe, you know? So it's like, all of a sudden we're getting narrowed constantly by other people who have narrow focuses, and we listen to that when we're younger, and we start to do this and this and this and this, and we think that's reality, but it's a far stretch of what reality is. I actually, a lot of times I actually like lay, I kind of get on the couch and commune, to go even deeper. Like, I can just kind of, it's the same thing you were talking about, where you're just letting go, and then you're just receiving, just allowing to receive. If you just receive, just let the feeling of receiving all this, and then that starts to materialize within the mind, in the brain, this beautiful brain of ours. It does. It gives us that space to do that. But I kind of, you know, meditation is like a communing to me. Like, you're letting it in, more things come in, because the brain, like, is so brilliantly dynamic that when you do that, you see how brilliant it is. It actually can be like, wow, I'd never had that insight before. Like, where did that come from, right? Because you were sitting, and you kind of like took everything that you have, and it just condensed it into this very moment of presence. And then this intelligence just it can overtake you, or just like an insight, like, oh my God, it's so obvious. How did I miss that? You know, the body is quicker than the mind. You'll feel the stress a lot of times in your body before you'll feel it in your head. And so there's a delay reaction. And when you do sit, you're kind of bringing them together. So you're a little quicker. You're a little quicker when life starts to pull on you and pull you away from really your kind of who you are. And the more you do that, the quieter you get with it. And then you're just quicker in life. So when instead of reacting where it takes a lot longer to kind of recover from it, you're speeding that up. So the recovery, you're quicker when something arises and you realize it's taking you away. You just realize it quicker. And when you meditate, you start to notice it faster in life, because really meditation, you want to bring this out in life. You want to be able to have these in your life, out in the world. because if you can't really bring it out in the world, you get hit too much here, then you spend 15 minutes here or 20 minutes. It's going to help it, but the idea is to bring it out, right? Like from the cushion out into the world. I was listening. They have these master classes that these guys, it's a company called Master Class, and they have these very famous people doing these teachings for the first time, all levels. Malcolm Gladwell about writing. There's a very famous writer, and they have these 2-minute commercials, and she says, the biggest problem for a great writer is distraction from humans. That's what she said. Great writing will never happen with distraction from humans if you don't give yourself the time. That's why they have writers' places, right, where they go away from everything to get it done, because there's too much distractions to get any kind of flow. And writers require flow. There's a certain amount of flow that you need to get into that space. And then once you kind of kick there, then it's like it just comes. For great writers, it just kind of rolls in, or a great painter or a great athlete. But they need that framework to kind of, like Susan was talking about, the meditation really is a framework. It's very, structured in many ways. It's a certain amount of time, usually in a certain place. And I've been reading this book about flow and kind of being in the zone. And it was talking to all these athletes about being in the zone. And the one thing that they all had in common was that for them to get into that zone, they had to free their minds from a couple things. One is they knew that this court was a certain size, and they know how much time it is. So they have a certain framework that is complete, and they know in that space what their thing is, because it's like score baskets and prevent baskets, and it's the more they have this structure before they start, and if they're working, and then who are they competing against? So if they have all these things in place before they start, it allows for them to kind of free the mind into this other place, the zone or flow place. But it needed those things first. That's why athletes can't do that when they go to the structure. But then once they leave that structure, and they're lost in space now, because now it's space, it's not a structure, and that's when it's difficult. It's easy it's a lot easier in the structure, because this mind likes that kind of structure, but it can't see that structure in space. It just thinks it's space, but it's not space alone. There's immense structure in space, but that's something that you got to have to like exercise or whatever. Find a place where you can kind of structure yourself so you can kind of let go of some of this stuff. The Buddha, he had a very specific question, and that's important. That's helpful to have some kind of, like, there's some itch in the back of you that says, there's something here. I'm not quite sure what it is. Like for the Buddha, it's like, why is there suffering? And that was the itch that just kind of came somehow in him. And then he went through all this stuff through all those years trying to kind of, but he would kind of go off course at times. Like he said, he would go off course here, a little bit off course there. And then he finally says, okay, done. I'm not moving from this tree, like, until I get that answer. So that's a very, like, putting it down, putting the flag down and saying, I'm not moving until some answer, whatever that question is that you're trying to answer, is really, you just said, I'm not moving from this until it arises. And that there's enough force in that from all the stuff that we've all created in our lives that it comes in much, much quicker than, I got my parrot in the background, but it allows for the arising to come in when you realize, oh, that itch, I know what that itch is in me. I kind of know what it is, but I don't fully have it realized yet. And there's a point where you kind of like just sit and say, I'm not, kind of mentally, I'm not moving from this place until I get this answer. And then all this stuff starts to collapse in on itself, because he's basically said, I'm not going to give you any more time. I want it. Like, I'm not leaving, so you're out of time, because I'm not leaving, and I'm going to out time you. And then eventually that gets realized, okay, I have no more time, and then it can collapse rather quickly into it when you don't have any more time here. Just it goes very, very quickly. It's just a question of being able to decide in that moment that you're going to not move from it. Just have everyone enjoy themselves, be safe, and be well. And I love you. Thank you so much. Thank you.